Okay. Well, thank you everybody for joining. My name is Chris Martirana. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Fotokite. We have Vanessa White here as well with Fotokite. She's a part of our marketing and sales team as well. And we have Jared Hoernig. So we really do appreciate you guys taking the time to join us today. And what we're going to do is discuss. Vanessa, can you put on the presentation? We're just going to talk a little bit today about using actively tethered UAS at large scale university events. So Jared is with Old Dominion University, and he actually was able to use our system with Vanessa. That was a few weeks back, I believe. And they're just going to kind of go over, real world application of kind of what they learned when they used it, and also just kind of get some questions and answers with regards to how this technology can be used in the future. So, but first, what we're going to do is we're going to start by, understanding what an actively tethered UAS is, also known as ATUAS, what the technology is, how it's different from other drone systems out there in the market. And then we're going to do just a quick overview of Fotokite for those of you who aren't familiar with this. And then again, we'll just kind of get into some of that real life application of the system. So Vanessa, I'll hand it over to you and we can get started.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chris. Are you seeing my screen right now, the presentation?
I am
Jared, you're
not.
shaking your head, yes?
Yes. Okay, good.
Okay, I just want to make sure before we move forward. So, to introduce myself again real quick, as Chris mentioned, I'm Vanessa White, and today's webinar is just to have a discussion on how actively tethered drones are helping universities, public safety agencies specifically, to get an eye in the sky for large scale events. That's not something that they were able to have access before. So we're excited to have our special guest. Jared's the Director of Emergency Management at ODU in Virginia. And ODU has really been a pioneer in using this technology today. They're one of our first agencies to use it from a university. And Jared will show us and talk a little bit more in detail of how actively tethered specifically has enhanced their operations. But as Chris mentioned, before we dive into the Q&A with Jared, we'll kick things off with a little overview of Fotokite, and also kind of touch a little bit more on where it specifically sits for agencies with other use cases. And then we'll do a quick Q&A for the rest of the team at the end, and follow up with closing remarks. And these are all of our lovely pictures. All right, so to kick things off, it's easy to say that, in recent years, aerial technology has really transformed how public safety does their operations. Traditional drones are very valuable. Where Fotokite fits in, 1% of public safety personnel are actually trained and licensed to fly standard drones. And Fotokite stands out because it's the first aerial solution that a first responder can use without needing a pilot's license or having previous experience. We wanted to fill that gap, that void that agencies were having, by providing immediate situational awareness in the field by anybody. And just a little bit more information on systems specifically is, an ATUAS. This is something new. What is an ATUAS? And Fotokite is the only actively tethered system on the market today. If Fotokite operates off a secure tether, and it offers continuous power with real-time aerial visibility, and requires no piloting. As I said, all of that is built in. It's constantly piloting itself and detecting whether there's any alerts or issues. It's set up so that all you have to do is arrive on scene, get the system up, have an eye in the sky, and it takes care of the rest. The Fotokite does have, again, built-in stability and safety features, so that allows you to be able to use this in restricted airspaces, bypassing any need for waivers and, again, piloting license that are typically required with a tethered drone. And that's pretty much the basic rundown of what the system is for our people that haven't really gotten too much into ATUAS yet. But I'm just, now that those basics are covered, I'm just going to share a little bit, or actually I'm going to ask you, Jared. Jared, good morning.
Hi.
Or afternoon. Could you share just a little bit about yourself and your background with public safety for the people joining us today?
Sure. Thanks, Vanessa, and thanks for having me. And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jared Hoernig. I'm the Director of Emergency Management at Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia, USA. And I've been in my position for a little over 10 years now, and I've been basically charged with resurrecting the emergency management program and fire prevention program from scratch at the university. So I have a staff of 3 full-time employees. We make a great team, and one of the big components that we use as part of our, or one of the big components of our overall operational posture is special event and incident management support. And to that end, Fotokite, this particular product has been really helpful for us to gain a lot of situational awareness. And I won't answer all the questions before they're asked, but we've had a lot of success and some learning opportunities in deploying this particular asset as part of our overall operating posture.
Awesome, Jared. Thank you. That's great. I didn't realize you were with the agency for almost 10 years now.
Yep.
Jared and I are in the same location, same area of Norfolk, Virginia. So like my neighbors out there. And so if I could ask this, so what initially drew you and your team to an actively tethered system? Was there a particular feature that made you think that, oh, this is right for us, this is what we need?
Yeah, a couple things that you already mentioned were really the highlights for what we needed. Initially, we purchased a pair of these off of a Department of Homeland Security Urban Area Security Initiative grant, and these are actually intended to be regional assets for the Hampton Roads region in Virginia for all of the institutions of higher education, and which is 15 of those, and then other public safety partners as they may need support with this kind of an asset. And our particular area has a lot of very restricted airspace. We have the world's largest naval base a few miles up the road from our campus with a large air station beside it. We have an international airport a few miles down the road from that as well. And so there's a lot of restrictions and a lot of hoops that one would have to jump through if you wanted to fly under a Part 107 license. We didn't want to have to go through all of that, and so this option gave us the ability to basically, put it up whenever we need to, without having to seek permission. I mean, courtesy, heads up with folks as appropriate, but otherwise, we have a lot more autonomy in how we can gain that aerial situational awareness as we need it. And we've used it for a lot of different events, and I'll go into some more of those as we go further along in the webinar.
All right, yeah, that's great. You've been using Fotokite for about what, 2 years now?
A little bit over 2 years, yeah. And we've been working through the whole update process. We've had some FirstNet SIM cards changed out into our units so that we have the ability to use that on the AT&T FirstNet platform. We've had really good technical support whenever we've asked for it. And we've been really happy so far with the reliability of the product, and then if we have any problems, the assistance in getting it fixed pretty quickly.
Yeah, and you know what? I think it's safe to say. I mean, you've been using this for a fair amount of events, and with the way that the FAA is evolving, the way that people are using drones in public safety is evolving. Uh, it's nice to be able to have that support. So I definitely understand that.
Right.
But were there any like specific challenges? Like those are all good things, but is there anything like specifically that we could talk about that that you had to tackle by getting Fotokite? Were there any hurdles you had to jump or things to
Yeah, I mean, in the grant process alone, we had to jump through a number of hoops in terms of basically having to create a lot of policies and a lot of things from scratch to satisfy Homeland Security requirements. But the actual procurement of the equipment itself was pretty straightforward, and we did that through Atlantic Emergency Atlantic Emergency Services, that's headquartered in Virginia, and we've been real successful in working with them. In the procurement itself of the units really wasn't that difficult, and it was over a phased amount of time where we got one Fotokite. We've got the tablets to go with it. Then we got the second Fotokite that we basically use as redundancy, or we loan it out to other institutions like William and Mary. Actually, right now, up the street in Williamsburg has our other Fotokite that they've been using for some of their football games. We've had a lot of success with it so far, and not a lot of real significant challenges in deploying it.
Okay, well, that's good. I mean, that's what the system was built for, so that
Right.
you wouldn't have to worry about all of that. But I was just curious.
Yep.
Uh, and I know we see these pictures here, and these were photos that I took of being out at the ODU Virginia Tech game a couple weeks ago, and just to get a rough idea of use case wise. I know we use this for football games, but how else is ODU using Fotokite beyond sporting events?
Yeah, so our campus, I should have given that up front. Our campus is about 24,000, now actually about closer to 27,000 in population. So we're a city within a city. We have our own accredited police department, and my Office of Emergency Management falls under the police department. We have used these for a number of games, virtually every single home game, as a complement to our existing camera system that we already have built into the stadium. Wherever there's a gap in camera coverage, we're able to quickly and reliably put up the Fotokite, and it takes care of that pretty quickly for us in being able to get some situational awareness either in the field, in the EOC, our Emergency Operations Center, or both. We've a couple particular use cases that I would highlight. We had a couple protests last spring that were related to some of the conflicts going on in the Middle East, and fortunately ours were relatively minor in nature. They didn't involve really encampments, so to speak, or anything of that nature, but it was extremely helpful to be able to put eyes up very quickly, and just having an operator beside it. Jerry Reed in my office was the pilot, and he did a great job of doing all the piloting for giving us some aerial situational awareness during that protest event, and we were able to capture all of the angles of our intersection that we had our protest at, and it was a pretty fortunate tool that we were able to do, because we were able to go and also set up some really quick cameras that we could hook up to our hardline camera system, but that took time. And when we knew that we needed something up right away, I mean, we can get this thing up and going, connected and ready to go in 10 to 15 minutes tops, and that's being generous. So yeah, protests, home football games, these have been used at other universities in the Hampton Roads region for a half marathon, and there was a search for an individual also, where they were able to use some of the night vision and I'm sorry, not night vision, the infrared capabilities of the unit to try to locate that person as well during low light conditions.
So search and rescue operations are still being used at
Right.
ODU. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So is it from an application standpoint, fire, EMS, law enforcement, all of that would be accessible through your community, right? Because you have ODU, but then you also have you have Norfolk PD down there. I'm sure you work with state police, and you're also in an airspace that surrounds federal DoD side. So how is it working with Fotokite, or how having a Fotokite system while being able to control and operate that with so many layers?
It's been pretty seamless actually. When we had our protest event last May, we set up in our EOC and we used the remote streaming capability that we subscribe to through Fotokite to be able to pipe the feed in to our emergency operations center. And in that room, we had ODUPD, we had Norfolk Police, we had Virginia State Police, and we had varying levels of representation from each of those agencies up to deputy chiefs and commanders that were there to be able to assess what was going on using the situational awareness that we were getting from the Fotokite. We have even used it as in demonstration purposes for members of DoD, and they've been very interested in the capabilities of the product. Basically we kind of served as a little mini referral service for them to be able to work through that process of investigating whether or not one would work for their application.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, that's a lot of good info. I'm actually going to scoot over to the next few pictures here. So these photos that we have on the screen here were taken during a different game. So these are the ones that I did not take, but I wanted to just kind of show and highlight these just to give to give our attendees just a little bit of a view of what they can expect from, you know, height wise, looking at the stadium. So at these football games, is there anything that stands out specifically, like a specific event where you're like, wow, like this was worth it, like this? I'm glad we had Fotokite for this. Is there anything you could think of on the top of your head?
Yeah, in particular, when you were here for the 14 September Virginia Tech football game, that's usually our largest football game of any given season. Our stadium capacity is in the neighborhood of about 22,000 people, so it's not an enormous stadium, but it fits the needs of the market in the Hampton Roads region. And that stadium was packed that day, and we actually had some issues with crowd control and crowd management during that game. If you're looking at the right picture on the slide that's showing right now with the smoke that's coming up, that's actually a cannon that just fired. That's right in front of the scoreboard, and to the immediate right of that is our north stands, which is our student section, and they came out in great numbers to participate in the event. They were ready to have a good time too, and in so doing, it was causing some issues with crowd control, access. We were concerned about the ability to get emergency services in quickly if we needed to. So having the ability to zoom in on that section, because the Fotokite at the time where it was placed was right adjacent to that big scoreboard in the lower right hand corner of the screen, that we were able to basically put the Fotokite up 150 feet up or so, look down, and be able to assess the, kind of the hot spots and the choke points where we need to be able to keep clear and focus our attention at trying to keep those particular areas open, accessible, or reopen them however best we could, given that we had a lot of people that were really interested in how that game was going to go. Even though the score didn't work out in our favor, it was still a really helpful tool to have working through, because I mean it took us through the third quarter of that game to finally get our arms completely taken wrapped around the crowd control issue. It just took that long with the amount of volume and surge that we had. So being able to keep that camera up and focused on the area in question really was helpful for us.
Yeah, I remember that game, and I do remember those specific incidents that were happening, and
Right.
it's very difficult to be able to see that when you're ground level, and to just have that constant overwatch. But just to move into, I guess, my next part of the question. So not so much on this specific game or this specific incident. While we were at this game, we did have other aerial surveillance tools in the air. So maybe if you could talk a little bit more about that, because we have some people on here that are, wondering, is Fotokite an all-in-one system, or, do I need to have drones in addition to? Could you talk a little bit more about your your UAS as a whole, what you're currently doing.
Yeah, so the university has untethered actual UAS that they use for mainly still photography or some video photography. And in this case of the Virginia Tech game, they did bring one out, and we're taking a picture of this stadium similar to the angle in the picture on the right. That is good, but also not good because we had a flyover during that game, and there were a little bit of concerns about the proximity of that drone to the helicopters that were flying over. And that was a lesson learned from that event. That, I mean, we told them about the Fotokite ahead of time, but then when we found out that there was another one, this is, spilling our beans a little bit here, but this is something that, we had as a lesson learned that has to be deconflicted, and we don't have to worry about that kind of a thing using our AT-UAS with Fotokite. And ask more of your question just so I can make sure that I'm covering it.
No, about your current program. So you answered my question. I was just curious of what type of drones they had. So you said it was a traditional
Yeah,
untethered drone, one that would you would believe someone would be a licensed skilled pilot,
right,
someone that
right.
would be would
Yeah,
have to get a waiver, which I'm sure in the situation for what you're talking about, they wouldn't have been able to get approval.
yeah, and there's a lot of hoops that one has to jump through on campus. Our Office of Risk Management on campus, they're kind of the drone czars for all things UAS operations on campus. We have a number of them throughout campus that are used for aerial photography or research purposes, whether it's for sea level rise documentation, whether it's for other research kind of purposes. They're being used right regularly in either on campus or off. In terms of the equipment profile that we have in my shop, it's limited to the Fotokites right now. That plus about 2,600 cameras that are throughout campus. We're able to augment wherever we may have a gap in coverage, or if we need to stand one up for a special event, that's where we can fill that need pretty quickly using the Fotokite application.
Okay, so for you, it was mostly just about ease of use and also being able to get through those hurdles, to be able to get what a lot of people say 90% of the benefits of a standard drone, but without having to jump through the hoops.
That's
Do you
it.
plan to expand to that in the future?
To non-tethered operations?
Hmm.
Well, it's the flexibility is nice, but for we only have a 208-acre campus. It's a giant rectangle. And with the camera coverage that we already have and the hazard profile that we already have on campus, what we have works for us. We're always looking for the next greatest improvement, whether it's in remote streaming technology, bit transfer rates, anything related to the ability to have remote access. We know that those are all things that are being discussed internally, and we're working on, we're investigating those options. But right now, we're pretty satisfied with the capability that we do have. If we bulk up on our staff a little bit more, and we can set aside some budgetary resources to take care of that, then nothing is completely off the table by any means. But the Fotokite's really working pretty well for what we need right now.
No, that's good to hear. But I guess so. Last question, 'cause I know we're going to try to wrap up here before we get to Q&A. But like I said, we have a lot of public safety officials on here. Is there any advice for someone that's maybe just getting started into, drones in general,
Yeah.
actively tethered, tethered drones? Is there any kind of like tips or tricks for everybody that's on here?
Gosh, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to go with that. One of them was equipment. We made our own kits to go with our. I mean, so the Fotokite comes in a glorified Pelican case, great. and then you have a tablet that goes with it. But then you're going to need extension cords. You're going to need tablet peripherals. You're going to need maybe stuff just to, you know, if you're on a quote unquote stakeout and you need to be kept comfortable, you want to have those kinds of things accessible to you as well. So we made these big backpacks that have, you know, color coded pockets and a big binder that has all the information that we need. That was an important part of being able to make sure that this was going to be a reliable operation for us. Was having the equipment, everything together as a singular kit. From the administrative side, you know, I'm going to look at this through the lens of we had to jump through DHS grants to get stuff, and for that we had to write civil rights policies. We had to write up a lot of things using rubrics that that DHS provided, and we were like, "Are you kidding? You're kidding, right?" And they're like, "No, you guys, if you want federal dollars, then you need to give us certain things in writing as essentially promissory notes that says so you're going to abide by things." So we wrote one a policy that ended up being a model for the Commonwealth of Virginia that they're using as a kind of like as the standard for anybody that wants to use one. They basically just send the Virginia Department of Emergency Management, who was the sub grantee for the DHS award. They reached out to us and said, "Hey, can we share your contact information with this other applicant from this jurisdiction?" And said, and can we get can you hook them up with a copy of the policy that you wrote? The That was, I mean, like grant administration, you know, in a nutshell, is never fun, and it requires a lot of time and effort, and making sure that everything is accounted for. So that was one component of it as well. The Another one is just regular maintenance of the Fotokite and making sure that that is kept current. A lot of software updates. It's an emerging technology, and so Fotokite's doing a pretty good job of staying on top of all of the software updates that need to be made on a regular basis. And so, you know, plugging stuff in, putting it out every, you know, week or two to, you know, fly it for 10 minutes, making sure that all your updates are current on the tablets that come with the system. All of those things are really important to make sure that it's reliable and ready to go when you need to pull it off the shelf, kind of a thing. So I mean, yeah, I'd say, you know, equipment, administration, and just regular upkeep of the system are some of the key things that make that go into making sure that we're going to have um, our product working, or our solution through Fotokite working on a regular basis. I would say those are key pinch points that folks would want to be making sure that they're aware of when they look into going down this path.
Yeah, all good stuff. Thanks for sharing, Jared.
You bet.
Uh, those are all the questions that I have, but I'm gonna take a moment to see if we have anyone joining us that has additional questions. So if you have any questions for Jared, Chris, or I, and you want to put them in the Q&A section on the webinar, we can get those answered to you, or get those answered for you. I don't see anybody right now, but
Jared, I had a question. I was wondering, like in general, what would you say is like the typical flight time in your experience with a photokite, and what was like the typical altitude that you were operating at? Because I hear a lot of different things in the field, and I was just curious as to
Yeah.
kind of what your experience is with the system.
Yeah, it kind of depends on the application. Like if it's a day football game, we're talking about a 4-hour window generally at about 150 feet ceiling. And that gives us the best ability to get, you know, a picture similar to what you would see on the screen here of the entire stadium. Um, if winds, like we're close to the ocean, and sometimes we have issues with winds. The Photokite has some built-in safety features that will limit the ceiling as necessary, just to make sure that the thing is still going to be reliably tethered. And It's done that on us a couple times, and recognized that, hey, we need to maybe keep the ceiling a little bit lower. We had it up for an arts festival a couple weeks ago, for about 4 to 5 hours per night. And in that use case, we were flying at probably about 100 feet or so. And we also found that we had the best resolution at night when we had about 2.3 magnification on the crowd that we were focusing on. When we do that, we can't see everybody, but we're limited the same way that a regular drone would be limited in nighttime operations. But the fact that we can see thermal imaging is a nice little bonus. But generally speaking, we actually put the unit up on a roof when we were monitoring that protest, and we didn't need to get 150 feet of we only went up probably about 50-75 feet for that one. But generally speaking, we're going to go up to the highest altitude that we can get to get the best overall vantage point and best common operating picture that we can out of that resolution.
And then just use the zoom in and out if you need to.
Yeah, the zoom, the pan, and if we're remotely streaming and we're in the emergency operations center, and we with via radio or via cell phone, we'll communicate with the pilot and say, hey, can you shift this over a little bit this way or that way, zoom in a little bit this way or that way, and that it helps to give a whole lot of additional folks a greater sense of what's going on, with just one person doing all the work.
Yeah, for those who aren't, really familiar with the live streaming capability, you just push a live stream button in a URL with a passcode, and a QR code is generated. So my question to you, Jared, I was just curious, is it kind of a mix as far as like when you're live streaming, are there folks standing next to you scanning that QR code, texting it to others, or is it mostly just utilizing that URL, or is it both?
It's been both. Usually we get um, uh, let's say my boss, the chief of police for ODU, Chief Garrett Shelton, or other leadership, other command staff, either within ODU Police Department or with Norfolk Police or Virginia State Police. It's been either or. We share the URL or we share the QR code, and both have been popular options for them to be able to access that remote streaming.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting because every department does things a little differently. We do have a couple questions that popped up.
Sure.
Someone was just asking about the capabilities on the camera. Our payload it's a thermal core, so there's a thermal camera. It's a 320 seat thermal core with 10 different thermal palettes. You can detect temperature, hottest point within the thermal camera. There's also 2 RGB lenses that gives you 16 times zoom. So if there's a little bit more you want me to add to that, Gary, please feel free to drop that in the chat. We have another question. Someone asked, we have 300 to 400 foot public safety LMR tower sites. How practical to use this to check cables and antennas on those towers for PM? Jared, what do you think about that? Just as someone who uses this in real life.
We actually we pulled the Fotokite out once to try to use it as a giant measuring stick, frankly. We have an abandoned golf course with a driving range right beside campus, and we wanted to potentially look at some space that we wanted to be able to put some fixed cameras, some CCTV cameras on for campus. Observation of the waterfront area near the Elizabeth River, and we were using the Fotokite to figure out what's the height of what we're dealing with and things like that. Now, if we're talking, and it worked out really well for what we needed to do to figure out, placement sites and how what was the quality of the substrate that we're trying to mount our cameras to and things like that. But if we're talking 300 or 400 feet, I think the issue becomes the camera's ability to pan upward. As I understand it, you can look at 100 feet, 150 feet horizontally or down, but it won't allow it to go up. to be able to see anything above that. I could be mistaken, so check me on that, Chris or Vanessa, but um, am I misspeaking on that one?
It won't go beyond the frame. So you're
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but if you are trying to look at microwave antennae, if you're trying to look at UHF or VHF radio infrastructure, or just assess tower conditions up to 150 feet, it's great. It's an awesome tool to be able to do that, and we actually have an inverter that we plug into our vehicle, and we do it right there on the spot, and we don't have to have any access to power or anything out in the middle of the field. So it's really helpful to have that ability to do that wherever we need it.
Yeah. Yeah, and just for those who haven't seen the system, the max height is 150 feet. And there's a lot of reasons for that. It allows for that Part 107 exemption for public safety operators. It's just that FAA threshold that we have to meet. And that's 150 feet from ground level. So if it's on top of a car, that's car height plus 150 feet, or on top of a building height plus 150 feet. So maybe that helps paint that picture a little bit.
Yeah.
Got a good question for you, Jared. Where did you get the grant funding from? You said he'd like to know he'd like to know where to get one, but funding might be an issue.
Yeah, that came from fiscal year 21 Urban Area Security Initiative funding from the Department of Homeland Security, US. And we partnered with the Virginia Tidewater Consortium for Higher Education to write this as a regional. We're kind of as a regional grant. The Hampton Roads area is known as 7 cities. Everybody's a little siloed in the way they operate, and because of we're kind of on the cusp of being one of those bigger urban areas. We're not in New York City, we're not in Atlanta, we're not in Miami, but we're also not, a smaller location. So we're kind of on that threshold a little bit, which is what makes having to write our grants from a regional standpoint very important, so that we can leverage multiple partners being involved in the potential use of the equipment to make it more attractive towards awarding that grant. So that was the key thing, was what we got it through UASI grant funding, and we wrote the grant specifically to address soft targets, which was a key thing. Nobody else in the region had written a grant for soft targets, and so whether this is being used for vehicle crash barriers, or vehicle and pedestrian potential incursion zones, things like that, monitoring that kind of stuff, football games, crowd control, foot races, 5Ks, half marathons, all of those kinds of things being considered soft targets. We host a bunch of those in the Hampton Roads area, and as such, it makes having this kind of asset an attractive tool to get the information that we're looking for. So your results may vary. It may, if you're not necessarily able to apply, or in an area that is eligible for UASI grant funding, it could be made available through state Homeland Security grant program funds, or other avenues. I know that there's a bunch of folks through whether like the Assistance for Firefighters grant or police department grants or things like that are also good potential pots to try to tap to seek money to purchase these kinds of equipment. They're not cheap, but at the same time, the types of, I mean, what the the way I could best say it is that we have you could spend multiple times more on something that has no tether associated with it and an unlimited ceiling, but then you have all the restrictions that go into Part 107 piloting, and so every piece of equipment has its limitations, and we accept what these can and can't do, and they work for the type of the needs that we have and the hazards that we're facing on our campus.
Is it a big deal that only one person is required to operate it rather than couple for some other UAS systems?
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, I have a staff of three, and one's a fire marshal, one is a planner, and one is an emergency management specialist. And the one that has the most training is the planner, and so he is busy flying that drone. And if needs to take a restroom break, then I'm flying the drone. Or I'm sorry, the ATUAS. Let me use the right nomenclature here, but the when you have limited staff, when you have limited resources to begin with, and I don't have a huge operating budget, I don't have a huge, overall budget to begin with, it will help to extend the dollar that you're spending on event needs, on situational awareness, to have a product like this to aid in overall situational awareness.
So we got another great question. It's is there drone sense, Axon responder, Fusus integration capability? Is the tablet the only control method for remote flight deck capability to control to be integrated into a command center? So I can answer that, and the answer is yes, it is compatible. And the only person that can control the system is the person holding the tablet. Now down the road, we will have. When I say down the road very soon, we will have remote launch capabilities. We're still kind of finishing that development, but for now, anyone holding the tablet is the only person controlling the system. There's another question. What was the zoom capabilities? And just to answer that, it's 16 times zoom. So there's two cameras, two RGB cameras, just like in your phone. When you pinch them with your fingers, it's going to flip to that other lens. So it's a mix between optical and digital zoom. Two great questions.
Yeah.
I think it's a second part. When portable, what is needed for operation? So I assume, Gary, you're talking about the power source, or how it needs to be powered. Do you want to address that, Chris?
Yes. So we have two configurations. So the one that Jared is alluding to, he has the more common one. It's a transport case. So it requires most people can plug it into a wall. An inverter can be a generator, but it does require constant power. It does have backup batteries, and the purpose of that is if the tether gets severed, it gets unplugged, something like that happens, it's not going to fall out of the sky. It's going to safely land on its own. The other configuration is called a rooftop box. It's the same exact kite, same system. It's just DC powered to the vehicle. So when the vehicle is on, the kite is ready to fly, and it's encapsulated into we call it our RTB or our RTB capsule. So when you're driving, the capsule's shut. Obviously, when you stop and you want to deploy, it opens up and deploys from the roof of the vehicle.
Yeah, and one of the things that we were investigating that was I've got a 2020 Ford Explorer with a police package on it, and initially we didn't have any kind of a shoreline hookup or any kind of a way to be able to provide immediate power out in the field. Through the grant, we had a little bit of leftover money, and we checked with Fotokite support on what is, if you needed to add something secondary to make sure you're going to have enough power. What we got was a 2,000 watt sine wave inverter. And that was what that has more than enough power to provide reliable power towards the unit if you're in a field, if you don't already have an inverter on your vehicle.
Yeah, that's a great point. In general, we recommend at least 1,000 watts
Right.
for an inverter. You can get away with 650, but you have about 400 to 600 watts of power running through that tether at any given time, depending on wind speed and things like that. So yeah, that's a great point, Jared. We do have another question. This is Fotokite system. Can it receive an arcing signal so it does not allow to fly? Would the system deactivate and make it land? What I could say is we have a lot of safety features built in. And Jared, I was going to ask you this. Have you experienced situations where someone maybe unplugged it while it was flying, or maybe there was wind that was exceeding its comfortability and it landed on its own? I guess the point I'm trying to make is there's a lot of systems in place where the pilot doesn't need to think about landing it.
Yeah, one example that we had recently was during our art festival. We'd put, whether or not it was a smart idea or not, the place in where we chose to launch from was immediately adjacent to a large parking garage, because that was where our loading dock and where our little quasi command post was located. And I don't know if it was because of wind that was wrapping around the structure or something like that, but we had the Fotokite above the height of that 5-floor parking deck, with room to spare. But as soon as we got it a little bit lower, it actually landed itself, because the wind speed was greater than the system would allow for safe operation.
Yeah, and just to add to that question, I mean, wind speed is probably the most common reason as to why the system may want to land. Your wind speed could be completely different at 150 feet versus at the ground level. So oftentimes the system will detect that wind speed and will come down to a lower altitude and will remain there. If this wind speed is still too strong, it will come down and land on its own. And that includes rain, too much rain or snow, things like that. Everyone's located at a different place, so they got to think about different, climactic implications of the system. But it is automated, and that's the purpose of those backup batteries.
Yeah, and we haven't, just for pilot comfort's sake, we haven't chosen to fly in adverse weather conditions beyond some breezy conditions. We haven't put it out in the pouring rain or the driving snow, but we know that it can perform in both of those situations up to a point. But we usually keep it as a fair weather asset more than anything.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to go about it. It's a tough machine, but it's still a piece of technology that
Right.
does have limitations depending on certain wind speeds, moisture, things like altitude. Those things all have to be taken into account. Heat, just weather in general. So.
Right.
Extreme weather conditions, no thunder and lightning storms either. Yes. Usually those two things don't mix.
Right.
I think that's all the questions that we had. Nope. Sorry, one more.
We got a great question. What is the most significant issue where the Fotokite made a difference?
Good question, Charles. Hi, Charles.
Is that one you guys want to answer? You want me to?
I'd like for you to answer if that's okay, Jared.
Sure.
Yeah.
The rapid deployment ability of the unit was really the key thing. I mean, the fact that we can roll it onto either a building rooftop or a field or wherever we need it, and be able to, like, I need aerial reconnaissance capability and I need it now. I got pulled out of a staff meeting a few weeks ago so that we could immediately set up the Fotokite to do some surveillance of flags from a Middle Eastern country that were being placed on a quad without prior approval. The ability to grab and go. We have our Pelican with kit, and then we have our equipment kit that we basically just put in a glorified JanSport backpack, and everything that we need between those two pieces, we're pretty well self-reliant and able to get something stood up with a quickness day or night. That's really the biggest benefit that we have, is if we need to be able to see something from the air with very short lead time, regardless of what the hazard is, regardless of, absent, thunder and lightning, things like that. This is a really helpful tool to be able to do that. The only thing that would make it even easier is if we had a rooftop mounted one on our vehicle. But I don't use it enough to justify having it mounted in that application. So the portable version works a little bit better for us. Plus, we can also put it into a whole lot more locations where you couldn't necessarily put a vehicle. So that would probably be, Charles, the portability and the quick deployment ability of the unit would be the things that I'm really impressed with.
And
I think
Charles,
he
oh, sorry, go ahead, Vanessa.
I think he elaborated a little bit more on the question too, Jared, of was there a specific emergency or hazmat situation that have you deployed it in those types of situations where you had to go? Because it sounds like, the incident you were talking about wasn't of urgency. Was there one that you can think of for EMS?
Not for EMS, but well, actually, yeah, we can say that we've been able to use, in concert with the camera system that we have at our football stadium. We've been able to look at either crowd control issues, medical calls, or potential fights or things of that nature in the stadium environment. I would still go back to that one that I mentioned earlier about the crowd control component. We had not quite a crowd crush concern, but we had enough people that were getting in the area that it was going to become problematic quickly if we didn't address and manage what we had on hand in terms of number of available police officers, sheriff's deputies, security officers, event staff members, to be able to get all of those folks and coordinate all of them using the situational awareness that we were getting from the Fotokite. We would have been having to find another way to do it that may have taken longer and eaten up valuable time. So
And historically, has that been an issue for you? So before Fotokite, you've had instances where you really didn't have anything that was available for you to be able to monitor that. So when it happened, it just happened and you had to be reactive.
more or less, yeah. I mean, we do the best that we can with the resources that we have to focus on the problem areas that we know of, but this just enhances our ability to be able to get that situational awareness, that common operating picture, and to bring in multiple stakeholders, in very short order to be able to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Okay. So Charles, elaborate a little bit more on his question on long time overwatch. I know we talked about the football games, and I know when I was there with you, we had this up for it had to have been at least 5 hours, right?
Yeah.
Has there been longer term overwatch than that with some of your festivals?
You can probably say double that for a protest that we had last May, and we had zero issues with it. I would text Jerry, our pilot, and say, "Hey, man, do you need a break? Do you need any kind of relief?" And the human needs to be relieved, but the Fotokite does not. So the Fotokite could stay up and continue to provide uninterrupted coverage of the protest site that we were dealing with without any issues whatsoever. We were really pleased with the fact that we could have it up from about, oh gosh, it was, I think, about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, maybe 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we had it running up until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning or later. And there was no issues with equipment performance, with camera quality, aside from the fact that it was at night. And every machine is going to have limitations at that point. But we had no issues with reliability for extended Overwatch activities.
All right. I think we have time for one final question. It's a good one. How has everything been accepted by your university leadership and students? So, having this out out in the community, how has that been for you?
Well, I mean, a lot of people are like, what did we do without this before? And how did we operate without having this kind of an asset before? Because this is a really helpful tool. Leadership is fully on board and they buy into it. They understand why it's so important and the value that it brings to the overall public safety operating posture. Folks from around the region have taken note. We know that there's other folks that are interested in potentially procuring them. So the word's on the street for sure that this is a good tool that at a reasonable price point that does really good aerial surveillance day and night, and it does it in a reliable kind of fashion.
And how about the students in the community? Putting this out there, as something that's new. I mean, I know that putting drones or aerial surveillance out there in any community is gonna raise some questions, right? So have you gotten anything from uh, the students themselves, or
Yeah.
people just passerbys at the games?
So nothing but support, actually. It's pretty cool when they walk by and they see us standing there with a tablet. They see that orange tether going up in the sky, and they're like, "Hey, what is that?" And we give them the rundown of what all it is, and we're saying that we use this to help keep the public safe. They're like, "Oh, wow, that's really pretty cool." And can I see the tablet? Can I look at what you're looking at? Sure, here you go. And it's been a kind of a cool little community engagement tool in a limited fashion, but we've gotten to push this out during arts festivals, during football games, in areas that were more open and exposed to people walking by, so they can see it. And we're happy to answer questions. And so far, we've had pretty good responses, and everybody has been supportive of this technology and the rationale for why we have it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jared, for your time, for answering our questions, and everyone joining us here today. Your insight is invaluable. I'm glad you're able to shed some light for others that we have on here that are considering the program. And also, we learn a lot from you. I mean, talking to you, I always learn something new. So it's
Thanks for having me.
yeah, absolutely. Chris, you want to close out?
I just want to just echo what you said. We really appreciate it. Um, this was extremely valuable to just get some insights for those who are, using this in real life application. So we thank you for your time, and please reach out to us after this if you have any follow-up questions or would like any resources. So thank you all again.